Hello, everyone. This is Monster Tamer Bloba here with Carl from Orange Pylon, the developer of Abomi Nation.
Hey,
He was kind enough to agree to do an interview about his upcoming game, Abomi Nation, that you can wishlist and play the demo of on Steam now, and I highly recommend it so far based on the demo.
as do I.
So, the first question I had here prepared for you was I was going to ask, what inspired you to make Abomi Nation in the first place?
So, Abomi Nation is a roguelike monster tamer, um, and it was inspired by me completely shifting the way I played Pokemon once the Nuzlocke challenge was kind of discovered or invented. Um, so, the Nuzlocke challenge and Nuzlocke comics themselves were a big inspiration in kind of everyone having their own unique story through a Pokemon game, which was kind of already true in that people built their team, but forcing people to use things they wouldn't normally use really diversified people's teams and the stories that happen when things would die. And I thought that that was so cool, and it basically offered infinite replayability. But I knew that Pokemon would never make an official product that had their Pokemon die in it for obvious reasons. So I thought I would fill that void and make the game that I wanted to play.
And I'm glad you did because my experience with the demo so far is quite fun. I've
I saw.
I've never really been into super into Pokemon, so I never actually did a Nuzlocke run. So playing Abomination was my first time really getting a taste of what a Nuzlocke run would be like, and I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to seeing some more of it.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it really elevates it. That's interesting that you're not that into Pokemon, but you're so into other monster tamers.
yeah, I mean, the thing that really got me into it was Digimon to start with, but I don't want to get
Hey.
too off subject because this is about you, not me, after all. But
Well, I think that's a good sign for the genre that you can be so into monster tamers without coming from Pokemon.
yeah, I think that monster taming in general is starting to expand greatly, and I think games like Abomination are going to be really at the forefront because it's such a unique concept, in my opinion, that you're not going to see a lot of other games like Abomination out there right now. And for people who really love the Nuzlocke mode, or people like me who are just curious about how something like the Nuzlocke would play without being a super big fan of Pokemon, that's one thing that drew me towards it was the roguelike aspect without, with being something unique that was different from Pokemon. And
Yeah, hey.
I think that's going to draw in a lot of people. But speaking of that uniqueness, the next question I wanted to ask kind of is about the Abomis themselves. So I wanted to ask you, what was your favorite Abomi you've revealed so far? I know that the Abomis we've had quite a few revealed, but you're still revealing them, so that's why I said revealed so far.
Yeah, yeah, we're almost done revealing the Abomis. I'm surprisingly close to my 100 being revealed. Um, So it's always a toss up for me. I mean, it kind of changes based on like, recency. Especially like right after I make one, I'm like, oh, I'm really proud of how this one came out. It's my favorite, right? And it's my girlfriend, especially, every time I show her a new design, she will say, that is my favorite design. And it will change every week with her. I used to always say it was Slog, which is the tiny snail sloth. Um, but I feel like Slog's at a disadvantage just because he's almost 4 years old, so I'm kind of used to him. Whereas if we're going by the recency thing, I really like Walwat, which is my Ice Lightning walrus, just because I'm really proud of how the animations came out on that one. He seems really smooth, which I'm sure isn't what most people look for when deciding their favorites, but I feel a lot of pride when I see Walwat, so I'll
Yeah,
say him tentatively for now. It might change in a year, it might change in a week.
might change with the next reveal.
Yep.
But yeah, that makes sense though. Is like I can understand, you made something and you really enjoy how it turned out, so that it kind of endears it to your heart. That makes complete
Yeah.
sense. What feature of Abomination do you think you're going to be most excited for in particular? Like, for
Um,
example, the roguelike aspects of it, or the customization aspects that you put in the menu, etc., like that.
yeah, I think, I mean, the roguelike aspects seem like a general answer, but it is true. Um, I think the I'm trying to think of a word, like the personalization of it, the way that whenever you play a run, it will feel like your team. Because I think you've only played through the demo once, right? But
Yes.
if you went through again and some different things happen, some of the dialogue changes when IoT talks to you in cutscenes and stuff. Um, so I really, I'm proud of how, as you go through it, they will reference specific things that have happened in your run, and I think that makes it feel unique to you. And I think that's the vibe I'm going for.
Yeah, I've actually watched someone else do a run as well,
Right.
and that their run was quite different from mine, how mine did, just by the sheer fact that the bombies they got were completely different as well. And that's something that I really liked, is how you don't have the default 3 starters or what have you. You have a random selection of 3 starters when you get your new thing.
Yeah, that was a decision made right away. Because when on top of doing Nuzlocke, something I really like is doing randomizer Nuzlocks. But unlike most people on YouTube that play just to get like ridiculous, so, oh, I got Mewtwo on Route One, right? I like hitting the similar strength option, so it is just a normal run, but it shuffles what you can get. Because if you've played through, Fire Red a million times, then you're sick of using Nidoran and Rattata, right? So it's nice to get some variety. So I wanted, especially for a roguelike, I wanted it to be randomized from day one. And something that I wanted for Abomination was to not have my like distinct starters, like to not have my Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle, because those would be like obviously the ones that you push in marketing. That like those are the face of the game. I didn't really want a face of the game. So IoT and Fume are obviously the faces of the game because they're the hero and villain that are there in every run, but they're not really like Abomis that you use. So I wanted every Abami to basically be on equal ground because that's kind of the point of a story unique to you. Like I don't want you to feel better or worse because you got the Pikachu equivalent on your team in Abomination.
Yeah, and that is another feature of Abomi Nation that I think really sets it apart from basically every other monster tamer I've played, is that awesome feeling of like, hey, what starter am I going to get this time? You know, and how
Yeah, it forces you to make a choice. Which Abomis stack up better against other ones.
another question I wanted to ask was, what is it that you hope to achieve with the game in the long run? Like, so some games want to tell a great story, or some want to introduce genre-changing mechanics, for example.
I want Abomination to inspire players to make their own story. So something that was really popular around Nuzlocke comics around the time they came out, and actually still they're still going, is a lot of fans would make comics um, around their runs, and so they would tell the story of their trainer going through the game, and each Pokemon would kind of have a unique personality, and you'd get attached. And what's interesting about a narrative like that is that because it's based on like the actual events that happened in their run, like characters could die halfway through their arc. Like anyone had the potential to die, even main characters. Um, and I just thought that was such a unique way to tell a story. And so I hope Abomination can inspire people to, especially like creative, storytellers and artists, to tell their own stories.
That is a very noble goal. I like that. How, carrying that feeling even outside the game. Like I would love to see anything like that. So if anybody ever makes a Abomination comic about your game, let me know and I'll cover that absolutely for you guys. Showcase it.
Yeah,
That's something I would love to see.
I'd be thrilled.
We've talked about it already a little bit with the whole aspect of the personalization, but what do you think will stand out the most when compared to other monster taming games about Abomination?
Um, well, I mean, my art style is pretty unique.
Yeah,
And by unique, I mean, I didn't particularly go for any art style. I just kind of did what I was able to do since I'm doing everything on the game. And what I'm able to do just ends up being really cute, apparently. apparently. So most of my monsters end up pretty cute for a game about serious death, but that's part of the charm, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think the fact that each Abomi feels pretty unique in the same way that most monster tamers feel unique and they have unique natures and abilities and whatever that might differ between them. But Abomis also have personalities that they can draw from. Kind of like I would compare it to Animal Crossing, where like you can have a jock villager or like a grumpy villager or whatever, and they all have different lines of dialogue that are shared between them. That was kind of my approach for Abomis because obviously I couldn't do it for everyone, and I want to write 100 variations of each line.
Yeah.
So I think there are 14 personalities, something like that, within that range. Um, and they'll respond differently to situations based on the personality they get. And those personalities can vary within each Abomi. So something can be, either grumpy or chipper or whatever the personalities are.
And another question was, how many monster taming games have you actually played before? And if you've played multiple, which one was your favorite?
Let's see. I would guess somewhere around 10. It's especially, I don't know how, it depends on how you define monster tamer as well. Um, like, for example, I would consider Viva Pinata a monster taming game, which is a game not many people played. It's on Xbox, where you have a little
Yeah.
garden and you as you plant stuff, it attracts other pinatas, and the pinatas come in. And then you need to meet certain criteria to recruit the pinatas and have them to. There's no fighting, but I guess that's not really a mandatory thing in Monster Tamers.
Yeah.
It's just taming monsters, and the pinatas are monsters. I consider that. Um, well, other than Nuzlocking Pokemon, which is obviously a big inspiration, I'm obviously a fan of Viva Pinata. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get into the monster taming circles for some reason. Um, Digimon, as you mentioned, is a great game. Story's crap. I hate the story. I mashed through it, and it still takes 10 hours to mash through all the text boxes in that game. But there's a great game underneath it that they just kind of hold hostage. Um, what else? I mean, I was inspired by a lot of roguelikes while making Abomination as well, because that's obviously it has two genres. Slay the Spire was a really big inspiration in how I present information to the player. Because in that game, basically everything that can be kept track of is available on the screen. So, like, if you have this little item that boosts these kinds of attacks by 2, don't worry about remembering it. It'll show you this attack is boosted by 2. So in Abomination, I show the damage calculation on the screen before you attack because I think it's important to know when developing your strategy for the game, you need to be able to know how much this is going to do. Especially because in Pokemon, like people do this when they play competitive, they run little damage calcs to figure out what something's going to do. Um, and I figured, why have that as a separate thing? If people are going to do it anyway, I'll work it into the game.
That is something personally helped me out quite a bit. Is that something I've always wanted, was to have that damage calculations built into the game, so I was really happy to see that.
Yeah, I mean, with Pokemon, a lot of people have played enough to the point where they're like, okay, I can gauge kind of like what this is going to do. I don't know much about this Pokemon, but I know it has high defense or whatever, so it'll do whatever, whatever. But I think with the amount of different monster tamers coming out now, it's kind of a high ask to ask players to memorize not only my new type chart, but also all the how all the stats work, how damage is calculated, and all that.
Another question is about just what your favorite thing about the project in general is, as far as working on it, like making a Abomi, making the music, the world development, etc. Like, what's just the funnest part to work on?
Let's see. The music is the only thing I don't make, actually. I did commission a musician for that, and he's great. Um, as my favorite thing to work on, the they kind of have their advantages, each one of them. But I would say programming is my favorite because being tasked with like a giant problem of like, how am I going to implement this feature? Figuring it out. It's very satisfying. Um, but on days where I'm, up against the wall and I just can't seem to solve something, I'm like, okay, I need to take a break. Animating's great for that because while I'm programming, I can't like listen to a podcast or something because I don't want to be distracted. I'm thinking hard. Animation, I don't have to think as hard, so I can just throw something on, maybe watch a show while I'm drawing, and it's nice and relaxing. But overall, I'd consider myself more of a programmer than an animator.
And the last question that I had before we get into some community questions, which we actually ended up with quite a few of, is what made you decide to go with there being no humans in the game?
So originally in the game, there were humans in the first build of it. Um, just because all monster tamers have humans, you gotta have a tamer if you have monsters, right? To fit the genre. Um, and I was originally going to do something uh, like you would pick your character at the beginning of a run, and each character would like maybe start with different items or like have some kind of passive ability or something, and that could have been cool. But as development went on, first of all, I realized I'm not good at drawing humans. That's one thing. Um, but also, actually, kind of inspired by games like Pokemon and Digimon. Like as I said, the Digimon story it takes so much of the player's time, and there's it's all focused on what the humans are doing in the real world. Digimon are basically like just background noise to this game. They're clearly not interested in talking about Digimon. um, but I think the Digimon are obviously the main draw of the game, so I didn't want my game to fall into the same traps. I didn't want to tell a story about humans. Um, and like I said, with Nuzlocke comics, it was really cool that your team got fleshed out and got all these personalities. So I wanted it to be about the story of your team, not about some human conquering the evils of Abomi Nation. So once I realized that I didn't need humans to tell my story, if I had some evil spirit taking over Abomi Nation, that could be a monster as well. Same with the light spirit. Um, and so IoT was added as a way to like unify your team because I had some initial drafts of it being about one Abami that sets off and makes this team, and that would be your starter, and that's how it would start. But then I realized like if your starter dies and the team continues to grow, eventually like you're going to get a team that has completely lost its original goal, but still needs to know it for the story. So IoT is there so that the story will always make sense because it revolves around her, but you don't necessarily play as her. You kind of play as the Abomis, which is also another plus. People like playing as the monsters, as Mystery Dungeon has shown us for Pokemon.
I think that is actually a pretty clever solution you came up with, adding that pillar there that is kind of separated from the Abomis you play as.
Yeah, it came very late in development. Well, comparatively for something that big. I've been working on this for 4 years, and that came, I think, 2.5 years into the project. There were still humans at that point. So it took a lot of reworking, but I like it a lot better this way.
Yeah, it's definitely a awesome and unique twist on the genre in general, really. Now for some community questions. First, we have Roxas from Discord ask, is Abomination your first attempt at making a game?
No, so I've been making games since I was 11, not commercial games like on Steam or anything, just kind of flash games on the internet. Um, and I made a few here and there. They weren't that popular at first. I made a Pokemon fan game when I was just leaving high school, going into university around that time. That was called Pokemon Campaign. That was kind of like a real time Pokemon. The combat wasn't that good, but it's pretty expansive for what it was for a Flash game. And then I started making original games because I'm like, okay, I'm done using other people's properties. I want to actually try and work with my own characters. So I made an original game the year after, and it ended up being one of the most popular things on Newgrounds.com that year. It was their number two highest rated, like most popular thing for the whole year. So I was like, oh, people are actually responding to my original projects. Maybe it's time I made a real commercial game. And then Abomination started, and that was at the end of 2016. I started development on this, and here I am.
Yeah, it's sounds like you've definitely had a long road with Abomi Nation, but I think it's definitely turning out really well so far, anyways.
Yeah, we're finally in the home stretch.
Again, from Roxas, he would ask if is Abomination a game that you yourself would play?
Yeah, I think I touched on this earlier when talking about Nuzlocke, but I Nuzlocke are basically the only way that I play Pokemon now, and I'll replay it over and over again. But I always wish I I wish the game were designed around doing a Nuzlocke because it creates a lot of situations where you're like, oh, I'm not sure, is this legal? Um, and it creates some hairy things like maybe the Pokemon you're leading with dies in an important battle, and then the NPC says, "Oh no, now we have to fight this other guy," and then he heals your team, and then you lead with the dead Pokemon, and now it's healed. And oh god, what do I do? Do I switch? Is this legal? And it creates these situations where you kind of have to work around the rules yourself. So a game that's actually designed around these rules would make life a lot easier. And that's why I have so many customization options to accommodate for players wanting to play whatever way they want.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely better when, obviously in basically any game you can make up your own rule set to play a game in various different ways, but it's always easier when the developer considers it for you and builds it into the game.
I have like preset difficulties, obviously, for people that aren't familiar with all the ins and outs of the game. But if people want like really specific randomization or a certain length of the game, you can now also set how many bosses there are from 1 to 8, and there'll be 6 by default. But you can choose whatever kind of run that you have time for you want to do.
Ooh, I really like that because that you mentioned Slay the Spire earlier, and Slay the Spire is probably up there with one of my roguelikes I've put the most time into. And one thing I've always liked about it was the length of it being pretty nice, but sometimes I've wanted it to go on for a little bit longer. And then you saying that the bosses will be having a default at 6, but you're able to include up to 8 is something that I will definitely be interested in, because sometimes I do really just want to sit down and do like a really long, almost marathon run on these type games. And it's
Hmm.
nice to see that being included as an option.
Yeah, most of my Spire runs are also in one sitting.
Yeah.
I just go through for hours. That game's so addicting, it's
Yeah.
dangerous. But I think it's made Abomination better, so I guess I can forgive it.
Now we're about to get into a bunch of questions from one person. I'm sure you saw this in your Discord.
Whoever could it be?
This is Marlon, the MVP of the Q&As. He comes into every Q&A I've ever seen with just a huge list of questions. So I'm not sure that we'll actually be able to hit on all of his questions, but we'll get as many as we can. So the first question he asked is, what is the desired play type you'd want the game to be?
Yeah. So I'd ask him what he means by that. I think does he mean like a casual experience versus like a
Yeah,
hardcore one?
I think that is
Um,
what he means is like, do you plan for it to be
so
casual audience or hardcore audience?
so whenever you're selecting the difficulty, it will say on normal that normal is the way the game is meant to be played. You know, try it on this first. If you don't like it, then change it. But this is what I want players to go to go into is the normal difficulty. Um, I think it's it's been enjoyed by obviously like the whole end of the spectrum, people playing on brutal with permadeath and people playing on casual with permadeath off, which is basically just like a Pokemon game. um, but I think by virtue of me saying normal is the way to play on the next to the normal option on difficulty screen. I'd recommend that.
Right. Next up, he had a thing I'm actually pretty interested in as well. Is where did the name Abomi Nation come from?
So when I was thinking of names, I didn't want it to be like a Mon game. A lot of Monster Tamers have Mon at the end, which is fine because I mean Digimon does, and I wouldn't consider that a Pokemon ripoff because they're pretty different. Um, yeah, a lot have Mon, and I definitely wanted to stand out in that respect. So I just thought of some little play on words I can do that could also, because if I drop Mon, then I also need a new word for what my monsters are called. I didn't want to just call them monsters either. A lot of monster tamers do that as well. Um, so I thought of the pun first. Abomination, obviously being a word for monster. Um, I thought I'd just break that up, and then that's that. It's stuck.
And it's definitely kind of the whole artwork, like you said, being kind of cutesy and charming, and then the little logo being called Abomination, like basically abomination. But then even the artwork and the logo is, you know, that same charming style. And I think it just has a wonderful contrast in the game where, like you said, it's like so much about the serious permadeath and everything, but everything's so cute. I just like it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The art style is like one of my, honestly, might be my favorite art style I've seen for a Monster Tamer game so far.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
I just love the designs of the monsters. Like I don't think I've seen one off the top of my head that I don't like at least some aspects about, which is pretty rare for me.
Well, that's very nice of you. Thank you. Because I'm not an artist, so it's good to
I mean,
hear.
you could have fooled me.
I animate out of necessity. Like I said, I always like work alone on my games, basically, with some help here and there. But since I can't hire an animator, I'll do it all, I guess.
The next question he asked was, "Are you open to cross game Easter eggs with other Monster Tamers?"
Um, yes, in one sense, and no in the other. In that I wouldn't put other creatures into Abomination. I think Abomination really is a story about the Abomies. You know, they need to fit the world uh, that I created. But I'd be open to appearing in other games. I'm fine with my characters uh, parading around other worlds. So if Sakurai wants to call me up for Smash Brothers, then I'm open.
Yeah, that makes sense because the, you know, Abomination also has its own unique style, and it could be kind of weird to see other Monster Tamer creatures appearing in the
Yeah.
Abomination style.
I mean, maybe one day, nothing's set in stone, but especially for launch right now, I would want it to be all Abomies, and then maybe that'd be something I'll look into in the future. But
Next up, we had, if you had to pick one game that you would say is the closest to Abomination in terms of gameplay, what would it be? Now, we've already said Nuzlocke a lot, but I would say other than that, since that's technically not a game in its own, but rather a specific subs rule set. So if you had to
yeah,
just pick a vanilla game that was like Abomination, what would you say?
I actually can answer this. There's one game on the market right now that kind of does something similar to Abomination, and that's Darkest Dungeon, which is hilarious to say because the art style for that game, I don't know if you're familiar, but if you're not, you can just hear the title and know that the art style is incredibly grim,
Yeah,
super dark.
I've played a
But
little
that
bit of
game,
Darkest Dungeon, and
yeah,
Abomination and Darkest Dungeon are not even close for art style.
yeah. Yeah, the complete opposite ends of the spectrum. But Darkest Dungeon is an RPG. That's a roguelike with permadeath. It's a party-based RPG, and your party can die. Now, it's not a monster tamer; it's a human tamer. So you're gonna have a bunch of your little guys in your army. But even though the combat's completely different and the overworld's completely different, and the way you do everything's completely different, I think the concept of the game is the closest thing to Abomination on the market right now. So if you like Abomination, you might also like Darkest Dungeon in the weirdest way possible, but it's true.
Yeah, that's a comparison I didn't expect, but completely understand. Now that you pointed it out.
I first played Darkest Dungeon while I was working on a Abomi Nation, so I noticed um, a lot of things that I was liking about it reminded me of my own game. So I'm like, wow. Well, at least if there's going to be something similar on the market, it's not actually that similar.
Next up, we have will there be a way to financially support the game, such as like a Patreon or a Kickstarter?
Well, just buying it, I guess, would be the best way to support me. I don't plan on doing any monthly like Patreon stuff. I might have merch once the game comes out, so if you want to support me beyond just buying the game, um, that would be other ways to support me. I don't like. I think any way to support me, I would have something for sale, like the game or merch or something. I don't think I'd ask for donations at this point. But thank you for asking.
All right. Next up is, would you consider paid DLC if the game is successful?
Um, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but I have already committed to making more Abomis after launch, like for free updates to up the number from 100. So there will be free DLC coming out, trickling out. Um, so if that's free DLC, I don't know what paid DLC would really be unless it's like a giant content update and like it'd have to be to the point where like I might as well just make another game, you know. So I can't see paid DLC coming in the future because I'm having free DLC come out, but who knows what the future holds.
And what would you say is the biggest hurdle you've encountered during making Abomi Nation?
Right. So I would say about a year to like a year and a half in, I decided to completely change the art style and the engine of the game. So I had made like a little playable demo that was like a really, really early build. Um, but the game was still 2D at that point. I know it still is 2D, but the way that the world works, like there's depth to it, right? Like the world is 3D, but the character sprites are 2D. Um, but at this point, it was still completely 2D, so it was like a flat background. It was like a bird's eye view, but the characters were still standing up, so it looked kind of weird. So I changed the art style completely. The characters also used to have outlines, so and I changed the way they were all shaded. That was like a huge deal, changing all the abomies that already existed. Um, but I figured it'd be easier to do it then than to do it once I have the 100 done. And I also changed the entire engine of the game. The original build of the game was running on just complete chimpanzee code that I didn't know what I was doing at the time, and I still barely know what I'm doing, but at least I can hold it together a little better than I could 4 years ago. So I completely redid the engine, um, and that took basically another year of development just to update the engine to where I needed it to be.
Next up, he would ask, will there be any type of crafting or cosmetic items you can give your Abomis?
I don't think so. I think a lot of the customization comes from actually building their sets and their stats. Um, I think any and any crafting might just like overcomplicate the item system. And the game really isn't long enough to like warrant collecting, a whole bunch of pieces of wood or whatever to craft what you need. Um, and as for cosmetic things, because of the way the sprites work, like I don't think I could make an Abomi wear a hat or something. If I were in a different engine, maybe. But yeah, probably not.
Yep, that's fair enough. The looks great as it is now anyway, so we can't add everything into a game, or the game will never get done.
Yeah, those cosmetic items are shiny, so you can get them.
um, Next up, he wanted to ask, where was my question? Oh, yeah, here it is. Is there anything you would want to add to the game, but you can't add it for some reason or another?
Um, I guess if I were doing like full like AAA release and I had like a big team and this like studio backing and all that, um, it could be like online, like competitive multiplayer. I have a scene for that. Although I don't know how great that goes for other monster tamers. I know Digimon had an online mode, but I don't think people really play it anymore. I think Pokemon's the only one with a long-standing competitive history. But I mean, it'd be nice. Be nice to have. Um, and I guess just 3D models for Abomis. I always wanted to see what they look like in 3D, but I have no experience in 3D modeling, so I didn't want to take a stab at that myself.
All right, and then I think the question that will end us out here, well, we've gone through just about all of them, would be, is there any question that you would like to ask the community?
Sure. I'll ask back to everyone else. What is your favorite Abomi? Because it's very hard for me to judge what everyone else likes. Um, so anyone who's listening, if you want to take a look at the Abomi list on my website, then tell me which one's your favorite so that I know which ones are popular with the community.
And for my favorite Abomi, it changes frequently, kind of like you said, for a different
Yep.
reason, because that really with me, I try not to spoil myself on all the Abomis until I see them in the game, is why mine changes frequently. But one Abomi that I have been playing with a lot would be the one I can't remember the name of off the top of my head, but it's the mountain guy.
Alpetite.
Yeah, I really liked him. I chose him as my first starter in my first run, so he kind of has that special place there in my heart for like, hey, he's the one of the earliest Abomis I've ever seen and ever played with. So I think if I
You
had to
evolved
pick
them,
her,
didn't you?
yeah, I evolved
Right?
him
When you fought the
too,
boss?
and I was really impressed with his evolution too. I was like, wow, this actually looks
Yeah.
pretty nice.
Well, strap
So
in. There's one more, so I won't show you. But yeah, I mean, you might just see it before the game comes out. But if you can manage to wait till the game, I hope you're impressed because the
yeah.
final one's my favorite.
So that is I'd probably have to say that his whole little line there is my favorite so far. Could change with my subsequent playthroughs as I find more Abomis, but that's what I'm going with for now.
Well, nice. Thank you. I like that line too.
So, like he said, if anybody else leave it in the comments below or join his Discord. I'll have links to his Discord and Twitter and everything in all media accounts below, like normal. But thank you guys for joining us. This has been Monster Tamer Bloba signing off, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.